Every road holds a story. What you're about to hear really happened. I didn't plan to share a room. It was supposed to be a simple stop, 1 week in a cheap hostel, close to the train station, just until I figured out my next step. When I arrived, the receptionist checked the system and said, "You booked the shared room, right?" I hadn't, but apparently, the price I paid didn't include private space. The town was full, and this hostel was the last available place. My only option was a bunk bed in a room for 2 people. "Who's my roommate?" I asked. The receptionist just shrugged. "He's already inside. Quiet guy, doesn't say much." That sentence stayed in my head, doesn't say much. Sometimes silence is comforting, sometimes it's warning. When I entered the room, he was sitting on the lower bed, facing the window, a single backpack on the floor. No phone charging, no suitcase, not even a book. He didn't turn around when I walked in. I said, "Hey." He raised his hand slowly, a half wave. Still didn't face me. I put my bag on the upper bunk and said, "Looks like we'll be roommates for a week." He finally turned his head and answered calmly, "1 week can be a long time." His voice didn't match his appearance. He looked young, maybe late 20s, but his voice sounded tired, like someone who had been traveling for years. I asked his name. He hesitated, then said, "Call me Daniel. Call me. Not, my name is." I asked where he was from. He just said, "Not far enough to go back." That was our first conversation, and for a whole week. It would remain one of the longest. I noticed something strange on the second night. He woke up exactly once at the same time, 3:17 a.m. I checked because I heard the bed springs creak above the noise of the ceiling fan. He didn't leave the room, just sat up, quiet, awake, for hours. He didn't wear earphones, he didn't check a phone. He didn't drink water. He simply stayed awake, seated on his bed, like he had something to wait for. In the morning, I asked if he slept well. He answered, "I sleep enough." I tried to be cheerful. "Are you sightseeing?" He shook his head. "I don't visit places anymore. They don't change." I laughed awkwardly. "Even new cities?" He looked at me for the first time with something sharp in his eyes. "Cities don't change. People do." Every time I asked a question, he answered like a man who'd been asked that question thousands of times and had already given up explaining. By the fourth day, I realized I was talking less, not only to him, but to anyone. There was something about his silence. It worked like gravity. It didn't demand anything, it simply pulled. You found yourself slowing down, laughing less, watching more. But here's what really started to bother me. He never left traces. No receipts, no food packages, no charger plugged in. No SIM card in his phone, no dirty laundry. As if every night, he could just vanish, without leaving proof he ever existed. There was one detail I couldn't ignore anymore. He always returned before sunset. Not late, not early. Always before the light was gone. And every time he walked in, he checked the window first, not to look outside, but as if checking his reflection, making sure it still matched who he believed he was. On the fourth evening, I asked, "Do you prefer being alone?" He replied without hesitation, "No. I just don't want to become someone new." That answer settled in my mind like dust on furniture, not dramatic, but it stays. That night, I lay awake longer than usual. Listening to the fan, listening to his breath. Trying to guess whether his silence was chosen or forced. On the fifth night, I made a mistake. We both couldn't sleep. It was past 2 a.m., and I broke the silence with a half-joke. "If you're a serial killer, this is really well planned." For the first time, he smiled. Not fully, but enough to show he'd heard that question before. "I'm not dangerous," he said softly. "I'm just trying not to be understood again." Again, that word changed everything. I asked, carefully, "Why not?" He didn't look at me, but he answered, "Because once people understand you, they expect you to become something, and when you don't become it, they stop calling you human." He said it quietly, like a confession rehearsed for years. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. Sometimes silence works like respect. The next morning, he was gone before sunrise. First time I woke up alone in the room, but he didn't take anything. Or rather, there was never anything to take. That absence felt strange. I sat on the lower bed, his bed. It didn't feel like his, it felt like no one's. As if he rented space without ever using it. Then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Under the mattress, not hidden, but simply placed there, was a small notebook. No title, no name. Just worn edges. I hesitated. Then I opened it. Every page had only one line. Different handwriting each time. I'm here, but I don't know for how long. I don't tell people my real name. Sometimes being remembered hurts more than being forgotten. One day I might stay, but today isn't that day. If you're reading this, don't chase silence. It follows you anyway, but the very last page only had 2 words. Your turn. I closed the notebook, and suddenly the silence made sense. I put the notebook back exactly where I found it. Not because I was afraid of being caught, but because I didn't know if I had the right to hold it longer. That morning, when Daniel came back, I noticed something unusual. He didn't look tired. He looked decided, as if he had finally said something to himself that he couldn't unsay. I waited a few minutes, then I said, carefully, I found the notebook. He froze, not with panic, but with acceptance. He didn't ask what I read. He only asked one question. Did you understand it? I nodded. Though I wasn't sure I did. And he said something I didn't expect. Good, because tomorrow, it will be yours. I didn't know if he meant that as a threat or a gift. The last day came too quickly, 7 days, but it felt longer. Because some silences stretch time. He packed his bag in 5 seconds. Because there was nothing to pack. No drawers to check, no belongings to separate. Before leaving, he stood by the window, hands in his pockets, as if trying to memorize the sunlight. Every room teaches something, he said. Even if it's only about leaving, I asked carefully. Where will you go next? He answered. Somewhere I can be nobody again, just for a while. Then he looked at me, not with intensity, but relief. Don't become someone just to be seen. Become someone who can live, even when no one is watching. He reached into his coat pocket and placed the notebook on the table. Then he walked out. The door closed quietly, not like an ending. More like a comma, something left unsaid. Hours later, the room felt too quiet. I finally opened the notebook again. The last page had his handwriting. The same 2 words, your turn, underneath. There was now a 3rd line, written that morning, in fresh ink. If you write something, that means you stayed. I picked up a pen. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. So I didn't write a story. I didn't write my name. I simply wrote one sentence. I chose to exist today. And I closed the notebook, not to hide it, but because some things don't need to end loudly to become real. I left the hostel the next morning. The sun was bright, people were rushing to catch buses, and luggage wheels echoed across the pavement. A normal day, a regular beginning, but not for me. Something had changed, quietly, without warning, the way seasons change when you realize winter has already passed. As I walked away, I wondered if I'd ever see him again. Maybe I already knew the answer. Maybe people like him don't return. They just leave a sentence behind and wait for us to finish it. When I reached the end of the street, I stopped. Not because I was lost, but because I didn't need directions. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a traveler running from the past. I felt like someone who had finally arrived somewhere inside. And that is when it truly hit me. Not all strangers come to change our path. Some come to remind us we still have one. I never saw Daniel again, but the notebook is still with me. And every time I enter a new room in a new city, I open it to that last page. I don't add to it. I don't rewrite anything. I just read those simple words, quietly, slowly, until they feel true again. I chose to exist today.